Nobody crosses that chapel door until I know why he stopped. Lieutenant Hannah Brooks said it without raising her voice, but the entire procession froze behind her. The chapel stood 30 feet ahead under a clean morning light. White double doors open only a few inches, brass handles polished, small electric candles glowing in the narrow windows on either side. Families in dark formal clothing waited with folded programs in their hands. Officers stood in dress uniforms near the walkway. The honor detail had already lined up beside the flag display, faces still, shoulders squared. Everything about the scene was supposed to feel safe, quiet, and sacred. That was why Scout's refusal hit the courtyard like a door slamming shut. The Belgian Malinois stood across the threshold, tan coat smooth beneath his tactical harness, black mask pointed toward the thin gap under the chapel door. He did not bark. He did not pull. He simply planted his paws and made his body a barrier between the people and the entrance. Hannah moved the moment his weight changed. One hand rose to stop the group. The other moved to her sidearm and brought it down to a controlled low-ready position, angled safely toward the ground, fingers straight along the frame, her body shielding the families without threatening them. Captain Mark Ellison stepped toward her, shock hardening into frustration. "Lieutenant, the chapel was cleared twice." Hannah did not look away from Scout. She was white, 32, blonde hair tucked beneath a tactical cap, blue eyes cold with focus, her face calm enough to keep fear from spreading. "Then explain why my dog will not let grief walk through that door." The words cut through the courtyard. A few people behind her shifted, confused, but no one moved past her raised hand. Ellison lowered his voice. "There are families here. Do not turn a memorial into a security scene." Hannah heard him. She understood him. That was the hard part. He was not trying to protect procedure for pride. He was trying to protect a room full of people from panic on a morning already heavy with loss. But quiet was not the same as safe. Scout's ears stayed forward. His eyes did not track the families, the officers, or Ellison's movement. They remained locked on the lower edge of the door, where chapel air should have smelled like old wood, fresh polish, clean fabric, flowers, and electric candle wire. Instead, Scout had found something else beneath it, something new trying to hide inside a place no one wanted to question. Commander Robert Hayes spoke through Hannah's earpiece from the security post. "Brooks, status?" Hannah kept her sidearm low and steady, her voice even. "K9 hard hold at main chapel door. Request controlled pause and secondary check." A long second passed. Scout did not blink. The open door waited like an answer pretending to be empty. Hayes replied, "Pause approved." "Ellison, hold the entry." Ellison stared at Hannah, then at Scout. "You better be right." Hannah lowered her free hand to Scout's harness, feeling the stillness in him, the kind that came only when a trained dog had stopped asking and started telling. "He already is," she said. "We are the ones catching up." 3 hours earlier, the chapel did not look like a place that belonged in a security brief. It stood near the center of the base behind a row of trimmed hedges, small, white, and quiet, with a modest bell tower, polished double doors, and stained glass windows that caught the morning sun in soft bands of blue and gold. Inside, volunteers had arranged wooden chairs in straight rows. White flowers rested near the front. Small electric candles lined the aisle, so no open flame would be needed. A folded flag waited on a table beneath a framed photograph, and the air held the careful stillness people create when they are trying to honor loss without disturbing it. Lieutenant Hannah Brooks arrived with Scout just after 0800 hours, walking the outer path while Captain Mark Ellison reviewed the final security plan beside the chapel steps. Hannah wore a realistic dusty field uniform, blonde hair tucked beneath her tactical cap, her fair face composed, her blue eyes quiet but alert. She did not look like someone searching for trouble. She looked like someone who understood trouble did not always announce itself. Scout moved at her left side in a fitted tactical harness, tin coat clean, black mask sharp, ears forward but relaxed. He passed families arriving early, ignored the scent of coffee near the reception tent, and gave no reaction to the honor detail practicing their timing near the flag display. He was not there to perform comfort for the crowd. He was there to read the parts of the morning that people trusted too easily. Ellison checked his clipboard and nodded toward the entrance. Chapel interior was swept twice. Storage room included. Doors sealed after the second pass. Hannah looked at the polished handles, the side walkway, the narrow service entrance, and the low vents near the storage wall. Who had access after the seal? Ellison's expression tightened by a fraction. Chaplain, 2 volunteers, 1 facilities tech. All authorized. And the flower delivery. Checked at the gate. The electric candles? Installed yesterday. He lowered the clipboard. Lieutenant, I know why Commander Hayes wanted a K-9 here, but this is a memorial. Families are already carrying enough. Hannah understood the warning beneath the words. Keep it quiet. Keep it smooth. Do not let security become the thing people remember. She respected that. She also knew peace built on assumptions could break faster than peace built on patience. Scout and I will stay outside the traffic flow, she said. Final pass only. Ellison studied her for a moment, then nodded. Do it clean. Hannah gave Scout a soft working signal. The Belgian Malinois lowered his nose near the chapel steps, then lifted it toward the seam where the double doors met. Nothing held him there yet. He moved on, following the wall toward the side entrance, reading old wood, floor polish, clean fabric, flowers, electric wiring, rubber shoe soles, and the faint metal scent of folding chairs. To anyone watching, it looked like a routine check. To Hannah, every inch of Scout's movement was a sentence, and she was already listening for the word that did not belong. Scout reached the side entrance and slowed by less than half a second, but Hannah Brooks felt it through the lead as clearly as if he had spoken. Most people would have missed it. Captain Ellison missed it from the chapel steps because he was watching the families arrive, counting uniforms, checking time, protecting the shape of the morning he had promised would stay calm. Hannah watched the dog. Scout did not sit. He did not alert. He simply paused near the lower edge of the service door, inhaled once, and stepped back before continuing along the wall. That step back mattered. A nervous dog pulled away from noise. A confused dog searched harder. Scout didn't either. He had found a trace that did not belong and refused to commit until the room gave him more. Hannah followed him without changing her face. She had built her career on moments like that, moments too small for a report and too important to ignore. She was not quick because she was reckless. She was quick because discipline had trained her to act before doubt could become delay. Scout moved past the storage room wall, nose close to the ground, then lifted his head toward a narrow vent under the window. Old wood, floor polish, flower stems, clean cloth, rubber soles, electric candle wiring. Those belonged. Beneath them sat something newer, sealed, smooth, faintly metallic, and pressed into a place that had already been called clear. Hannah crouched once, pretending to adjust Scout's harness while she looked at the vent screws, the door seam, the slight pressure mark on the dust near the threshold. Nothing dramatic. Nothing anyone would point to during a normal walkthrough. That was how mistakes survived inside safe places. They learned to look ordinary. Ellison came closer, his shoes quiet on the walkway. Anything. Hannah rose slowly. Maybe. His mouth tightened. Maybe is not enough to delay a memorial. I have not delayed it. Not yet. Hannah looked toward the families gathering near the reception tent. A small boy held a folded program with both hands. An older woman stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder, eyes fixed on the chapel doors like she needed them to remain untouched by the rest of the world. Hannah understood that need so deeply it made her voice even colder. That is why I am checking now. Scout circled back toward the main steps, calm and controlled, ignoring the scent of coffee, perfume, leather shoes, pressed uniforms, and fresh flowers. He was not hunting people. He was separating the chapel from whatever had been added to it after the sweep. Hannah saw the difference in his posture as they returned to the front walk. His body lowered by a fraction. His ears locked forward. His tail settled into a working line. Ellison saw it this time. Lieutenant, he said quietly, what is he doing? Hannah kept her eyes on Scout as the Belgian Malinois stopped 10 feet from the double doors. He is deciding whether the door is telling the truth. Ellison did not answer. For the first time that morning, his clipboard lowered to his side. The chapel bell did not ring. The families did not move forward yet. The courtyard remained gentle, polished, and still. But Scout was no longer walking a routine pass. He was building a case one breath at a time, and Hannah knew the next signal would decide whether the ceremony began on schedule or whether everyone behind her would learn that peace is sometimes protected by the one who refuses to step inside. The final pass should have taken less than a minute. That was what Captain Mark Ellison had expected when he allowed Hannah Brooks and Scout to circle back toward the main chapel doors. One clean sweep, one quiet nod, and the families would move inside under the soft colored light of the stained glass. Instead, Scout stopped at the first stone step and did not climb it. His paws stayed on the walkway, his head lowered toward the door seam. The Belgian Malinois inhaled once, then shifted his body sideways across the approach, placing himself between the people and the entrance with a calm so complete it felt more serious than panic. Hannah stopped with him. The honor detail behind her held position without being told. Ellison looked at his watch, then at the families, then at the dog. "We are inside the window," he said under his breath. "If we stop now, everyone notices." Hannah kept her voice low. "Everyone notices more if we are wrong." Scout's ears moved toward the storage wall inside the chapel, though he could not see it from the walkway. That was the detail that made Hannah's skin go cold beneath her uniform. He was not reacting to the door itself. He was reading air moving under it, air that carried the chapel's inside story out into the open. Fresh plastic seal, small metal trace, cleaning solution layered too heavily near one side. Something had been placed or moved after the sweep, and someone had tried to make the room smell finished. Hannah lifted her left hand slightly, signaling the first row of guests to remain back without alarming them. Her right hand stayed free, but not dramatic. She did not touch her sidearm yet. Protocol lived in sequence, and she respected sequence because control mattered more than fear. Ellison stepped closer, his face tight. "Lieutenant, I need a clear reason." Hannah glanced at Scout. The dog had lowered into a sit, eyes fixed on the bottom of the doors, body still except for the steady movement of his breath. "There is your reason. A dog sitting is not a report." "No," Hannah said. "It is a warning before the report exists." The words landed between them, and for a second Ellison had nothing to put against them except the confidence of a completed checklist. Commander Robert Hayes came over the radio. "Brooks, update." Hannah answered without taking her eyes off the door. "K9 has escalated from interest to hard hold at main entry. Indication appears tied to interior airflow, likely storage side. Request security team to hold crowd at 30 feet and prepare controlled door check." Hayes did not hesitate. "Approved. Ellison, support the hold." Ellison's jaw tightened, but he moved. That was his first act of trust. He turned to the nearest security officer and gave a quiet instruction. The families were guided back with soft words. No alarm, no rush, only a respectful pause framed as a final preparation. Hannah watched Scout. He did not look at the guests. He did not look at Ellison. He watched the door as if the chapel had whispered something only he could hear, and he was refusing to let anyone mistake silence for safety. The controlled pause spread across the chapel courtyard without breaking it. That was the first thing Hannah Brooks noticed, and it told her Captain Mark Ellison still knew how to protect people even while he hated being wrong. Families were guided back with soft voices and open palms. The honor detail held their line. The chaplain stepped aside near the reception tent, face composed, trusting the quiet authority moving through the space. No one ran. No one shouted. The memorial remained intact because discipline had reached the problem before fear did. Scout stayed at the chapel door, seated with his tan body angled across the threshold, black mask aimed at the gap beneath the polished wood. Hannah stood beside him, sidearm still holstered, one hand near his harness, blue eyes fixed on the same narrow line of shadow that held his attention. Ellison came back from the security officer and lowered his voice. "Crowd is at 30 feet. Door team is ready." Hannah nodded once. "Open it slow. No one steps in until Scout clears the air." Ellison looked like he wanted to argue with the phrasing, then did not. That was the second act of trust. Two security officers moved to the double doors and opened them a few inches wider. Air slipped out first. Scout's nostrils moved. His ears held forward. He did not lunge. He did not bark. He rose from the sit and took one measured step toward the opening, then stopped again, head turning slightly toward the interior storage room on the right side of the chapel. Hannah saw the line immediately. "Storage side," she said. Ellison repeated it into his radio. "Storage side. Controlled entry." Hannah drew her sidearm only then, smooth and low, angled safely toward the floor, fingers straight along the frame, not as a threat, but as protocol at a crowded entry point where a K9 had given a hard hold twice. She did not look dramatic. She looked trained. That difference mattered. The first security officer entered with slow steps while the second held the door. Scout followed at Hannah's side, not ahead of control, not behind purpose. Inside, the chapel was exactly as it had been prepared to look. White flowers, polished chairs, electric candles, folded programs, quiet flags, soft morning light. Safe places were dangerous only when people believed appearance was proof. Scout ignored the aisle and turned directly toward the storage room. At the door, he paused, lowered his nose to the seam, then sat. Final. Ellison stepped inside behind them, face tight. Open it. The officer opened the storage room according to procedure. Behind stacked flower boxes and a coil of electric candle wiring sat a sealed training package with a bright administrative tag partly hidden under a cloth. It was not active. It was not a direct threat. But it did not belong there. Not during a memorial, not after a cleared sweep, not beside wiring and supplies where one wrong assumption could have triggered alarms, panic, and a failed security event. Ellison stared at the tag, then at Scout. Hannah lowered her sidearm back to safe control and kept her voice quiet. He was not warning us about people. Scout remained seated, calm and certain. He was warning us about what people missed. Commander Robert Hayes entered the chapel through the side aisle with 2 security officers behind him and stopped when he saw the package in the storage room. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The room was quiet enough for accountability to travel without volume. The sealed training package sat behind flower boxes and electric candle wiring, its administrative tag half covered by a folded cloth, harmless in design but wrong in place, wrong in timing, wrong in every way that mattered before a memorial full of families. Captain Mark Ellison stood beside the doorway with his clipboard lowered at his side. For the first time that morning, the checklist looked smaller than the dog. Who placed it? Hayes asked. One of the officers checked the tag. Security readiness test package from yesterday, sir. It was supposed to be removed after inspection. Ellison closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them again. That is on my team. Hannah Brooks said nothing. She had no use for victory in a room built for grief. Scout sat beside her left boot, tin coat still, black mask angled toward the storage shelves as if the chapel had not fully finished speaking yet. His work was not emotional. It was exact. New plastic seal under old wood scent. Small metal trace near clean fabric. Airflow changed by a door that had been opened after the final sweep. Cleaning solution heavy enough to cover carelessness, not enough to fool him. Hayes looked at Hannah. Can he clear the room again? Hannah nodded once. Yes, sir. Ellison stepped back immediately. Given the chapel. That was the third act of trust, and this time no one had to force it from him. Hannah holstered her sidearm fully, checked the latch with practiced calm, and gave Scout the soft command. The Belgian Malinois rose and moved through the chapel without disturbing a chair, a flower, or a flag. He passed the storage room first, confirmed the shelves, then worked along the wall beneath the stained glass windows. He checked the aisle where the family would walk, the front table with the folded flag, the rows of wooden chairs, and the small alcove near the electric candles. No barking, no rushing, no show, just discipline moving through a sacred space with quiet respect. Outside, the families waited under the morning light, unaware of the full weight of the pause. They only knew someone had asked them to hold back for a few minutes, and that the people in uniform had kept their voices low. That was how it should be. Protection did not always need witnesses. It only needed to arrive in time. Scout returned to the chapel door and sat facing outward, not inward. Hannah read the signal and let her shoulders ease by a fraction. Clear. Hayes repeated it into his radio. Chapel clear. Resume entry in 2 minutes. Ellison looked at Scout for a long moment, then at Hannah. I cleared the room, he said quietly. Hannah rested one hand on Scout's harness. He cleared the truth. Ellison accepted the correction without defense. Outside, the honor detail straightened, the families stepped forward again, and the chapel remained peaceful because one dog had refused to let peace be assumed. The chapel entry resumed with the kind of quiet that made the pause feel almost invisible to anyone who had not been inside the storage room. Families moved forward again beneath the morning light, programs held close, shoulders drawn together, faces carrying the weight they had come to honor. The honor detail opened the doors wider, and soft colored light from the stained glass crossed the wooden floor in bands of blue and gold. Scout stayed at the side of the entrance with Hannah Brooks beside him, no longer blocking the threshold, but still positioned where he could see the aisle, the storage door, and the faces entering the room. He had shifted from warning to guard without being told twice. That was what made him valuable. A dog trained only to find a problem could miss the duty after the problem was removed. Scout understood that clearing a room was not the same as abandoning it. Hannah stood still, her sidearm secured, her hand relaxed near the harness, her fair face composed beneath her tactical cap. Some guests glanced at her, and then at Scout, curious about the delay, but none of them knew enough to be afraid. That was the gift the team had protected for them. They would remember the folded flag, the chaplain's voice, the flowers, the names spoken with respect. They would not remember confusion at the door. They would not remember a package behind storage boxes. They would not remember how close the ceremony had come to being interrupted by a careless oversight. Captain Mark Ellison stood near the last row, posture straight, clipboard gone now, hands folded in front of him. Without the checklist in his grip, he looked less like a man guarding his plan and more like a man watching the consequences of almost trusting it too much. Commander Robert Hayes passed behind him and gave a small nod toward Hannah and Scout. Ellison returned it, but his eyes stayed on the dog. Scout lay down beside the door only after the final family member entered, front paws aligned, head up, ears forward. He did not seek comfort from the room. He gave it. The chaplain stepped to the front and began in a voice low enough to hold the space together. Hannah listened without letting her attention drift. Every few seconds, her eyes moved to Scout. His breathing remained steady. His gaze crossed the aisle, the side door, the storage room, then returned to the entrance. There was no alert now, no hard hold, no hidden pressure in his body, only vigilance. Ellison moved closer during the first hymn, stopping beside Hannah but leaving enough space for Scout. The families did not know, he whispered. Hannah kept her eyes forward. Good. They should not have to. No, she said. They came here to remember someone, not our mistake. Ellison absorbed that without flinching. Your dog protected that. Hannah looked down at Scout. The Belgian Malinois blinked once, calm beneath the stained glass light. He protected the door, she said. That was enough. Ellison looked toward the storage room one last time, then back to the front of the chapel. The ceremony continued, unbroken to everyone who mattered most. And near the entrance, Scout stayed still, a silent guard at the edge of grief, proving that sometimes the strongest act of protection is not what people see, but what they never have to know. The ceremony ended 21 minutes later, and the chapel released its silence slowly. Families stood row by row, some holding folded programs, some touching shoulders, some pausing near the flag table, as if leaving too quickly would dishonor the weight of the room. Hannah Brooks stayed by the door with Scout at her side, giving each person a clear path out while keeping herself just outside their grief. She did not need them to thank her. Most of them did not know there was anything to thank. That was the cleanest kind of protection, the kind that left peace looking untouched. Scout rose only when the final family member passed through the doorway. The Belgian Malinois did not follow the crowd. He turned once toward the storage room, checked the air, then returned to heel beside Hannah. The package had been removed. The shelves had been cleared again. The electric candle wiring had been separated and tagged. The room now smelled like old wood, flowers, clean cloth, and the faint warmth of lights that belonged there. Captain Mark Ellison waited near the last row until the chapel was empty except for Hannah, Scout, Commander Robert Hayes, the chaplain, and 2 security officers. Without the audience, Ellison's expression had no place to hide. The readiness package was logged out yesterday, he said. It should never have been staged inside the storage room after final sweep. Hayes looked at him. That will be in the report. Ellison nodded. It should be. Hannah watched him accept the correction, and her respect for him increased by a quiet inch. A man who could own a mistake before rank forced it from him was still useful. Ellison looked down at Scout. The dog stood in the colored light falling from the stained glass, ears forward, harness smooth against his tin coat, black mask calm and unreadable. He knew before any of us had proof. Hannah rested her hand lightly against the harness. He had proof. We just could not read it yet. The chaplain, who had said almost nothing since the ceremony began, stepped closer and looked toward the storage room door. I wondered why he stayed at the entrance the whole time. Hannah's voice softened, but only slightly. Some dogs search. Some dogs guard. Scout does both. Hayes gave a small nod. Security protocol changes today. No administrative packages staged within event spaces after final sweep. K9 pass becomes mandatory at chapel entry, storage, and service doors. Ellison accepted it without argument. Yes, sir. The words were plain, but they carried the true result of the morning. Not praise. Change. Hannah looked down at Scout. He did not understand policy, but he understood tone. The room no longer doubted the door he had refused. It had learned from it. Outside, sunlight spread across the walkway where families had stood only minutes before, unaware that their memorial had been protected by a dog who would not cross a threshold until truth crossed first. The final security review took place in the small office behind the chapel after the last vehicle had left the parking area. The room smelled faintly of paper, coffee, polished wood, and the flowers still cooling in the empty sanctuary beyond the wall. Commander Robert Hayes stood near the desk with the event report in his hand. Captain Mark Ellison stood across from him. No clipboard now, no checklist to hide behind. Only the facts of a morning that had almost trusted itself too much. Hannah Brooks remained by the door with Scout sitting at her left side, the Belgian Malinois calm beneath his tactical harness, tin coat touched by the colored light still coming through the stained glass hallway. He looked smaller in that quiet office than he had at the chapel threshold, but Hannah knew better. Size had never been the measure of a guardian. Hayes looked at the report. No disruption to the ceremony. No crowd panic. Package recovered. Protocol revised. He lowered the folder and looked at Ellison. That is the clean version. Ellison nodded once. The honest version is that I trusted the sweep more than the signal. Hannah did not interrupt. She respected the sentence because it cost him something. Ellison turned toward her, then toward Scout. I thought you were creating a scene. His voice stayed level, but it carried the weight of a man correcting himself in public even after the public had gone. You were preventing one. Scout's ears shifted at the tone, but he did not rise. Hannah rested her hand lightly on his harness. He does not care about scenes, she said. He cares about thresholds. Hayes let that sit. Outside the office window, the chapel walkway stood empty in the late morning sun. 30 feet of concrete, 2 white doors, and a place where families had been held back just long enough to keep grief from colliding with carelessness. Ellison looked through the window too. I cleared the room, he said quietly. Hannah followed his gaze to the chapel doors. You cleared what a checklist could see. She looked down at Scout. He cleared what the room was still carrying. There was no triumph in her voice. Only precision. Hayes closed the report. From now on, no final entry without K9 confirmation on memorial events, family events, or any space with public access after a sweep. Ellison answered immediately. Understood. That was the real apology. Not words. Change. Hannah gave Scout a soft release, and he stood, stretching once before returning to heel. His work was done, but his eyes still checked the hallway before Hannah stepped through it. At the chapel entrance, they paused. The doors were open now, the aisle empty, the electric candles dimmed, the folded flag removed with honor. Scout looked at the threshold where he had stopped the whole morning from moving too fast. Then he sat once, calm and final. Hannah crouched beside him and touched the side of his neck. Good guard, she whispered. Ellison stood a few feet behind them and heard it. He said nothing, but when Scout rose and walked out with Hannah, Ellison stepped aside, as if making room for rank. The chapel stayed peaceful because one dog had refused to let peace be assumed. And long after the report was filed, every person on that security team would remember the lesson at the door. Some guardians protect a room by entering first, and some protect it by knowing when no one should enter at all.